In a move that should surprise absolutely no one, Donald Trump and Rupert Murdoch, the head of the Wall Street Journal, have agreed to postpone depositions for several months in the Jeffrey Epstein lawsuit filed by Donald Trump in the Southern District of Florida. For a long time, Donald Trump has been saying that he wanted to depose Rupert Murdoch quickly. His team even filed a motion to try to expedite his deposition in this case before motions to dismiss were even heard. Why? Well, because according to Trump, Rupert Murdoch's ailing health, he's 94 years old, made it requirable that his deposition be heard before any motion to dismiss was filed. Well, now they reached an agreement, and neither Trump nor Murdoch will be deposed in the case involving the Jeffrey Epstein birthday letter, the 50th birthday letter, where Donald Trump allegedly drew a naked woman to Jeffrey Epstein and was in Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday book. Well, Donald Trump won't be deposed for several months. Rupert Murdoch won't be deposed for several months. It's almost like they don't want Trump sitting for a deposition because here's what would have happened if this moved forward as planned. If Murdoch was supposed to sit for a deposition in the next month or so, because that's what Trump wanted, then Murdoch would file a similar response and say, you know what? You're going to force me to sit. I'm going to force you to sit. Donald Trump, you have to sit for a deposition as well. And I think the last thing the White House and Donald Trump's legal team wants is for Trump to have to sit for a deposition that could be hours long, 7 hours long, and to talk about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and do it all under oath. It's not that his deposition won't ever happen. It may. If I had to guess, it probably won't. And you want to know why it won't? Because if I had to guess, this case will either A, be thrown out on a motion to dismiss, or B, they're going to come to some type of settlement arrangement so that neither Murdoch nor Trump ever have to testify. Now, before I continue, please consider subscribing to support my work by clicking the button below or by sending a one time donation via Venmo to Aaron Parnas. Now, in other news, we are building a nuclear reactor on the moon. No, I'm not kidding. That is a real plan, the first plan by interim NASA Administrator Sean Duffy. Now, if Sean Duffy's name sounds familiar to you, want to know why? Well, it's because he's also serving as a Secretary of Transportation, and now he's currently the interim head of NASA. And well, according to Politico, he will be announcing that the United States will begin accelerated plans to build a 100 kilowatt nuclear reactor on the moon by 2030, part of a push to, quote, win the second space race. But we have budget cuts. NASA has been hit with more budget cuts than most agencies. And while many critics are saying, how are you going to build a nuclear reactor on the moon where we can't even get a rocket to the moon right now? Number one. Number two, we don't have the funding to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. He also is going to replace the International Space Station with commercial space stations, aligning with the Trump administration's focus on crewed space flight and competition with China and Russia. Speaking about Russia, Attorney General Pam Bondi has directed a federal prosecutor to open up an investigation, a grand jury investigation into President Obama and Obama era officials. Now, President Obama has immunity, right? He's not going to be indicted for anything. And Donald Trump himself recognized that Obama has immunity. Why? Because of the Supreme Court case. But even setting that aside, there's no evidence that neither President Obama or any Obama era official did anything wrong. And yet, now Pam Bondi has put forth a federal prosecutor to put evidence in front of a grand jury with the purpose of seeking an indictment. I'm an attorney. I practice law. I've dealt with grand jury investigations before. To get an indictment in front of a grand jury, you need to have probable cause that a crime was committed. That is the standard. It's a very low standard. These Obama officials like John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, they're not going to be able to put their own evidence forward. Only the federal government. And if the grand jury votes, usually it's about 20 grand jurors, 21, 22, somewhere around there. If they vote to issue a true bill indictment, well, then these individuals will be arrested and there'll be a court proceeding. But the issue here is Senate. Remember the United States Senate? Well, under Marco Rubio's leadership on the Senate Intelligence Committee back in 2020, they debunked all of this Russia investigation claims that Pam Bondi is currently pushing. The current Secretary of State, as a senator, already debunked it. That's problem number one for them. Problem number two for them is that the statute of limitations for most federal crimes is 5 years. So conspiracy, false statements, that's all 5 years. All of these incidences happened back 9 years ago. So the only crimes that theoretically could be charged are treason. That doesn't have a 5-year statute of limitations. But are you really going to charge the former FBI director with treason? Is that where they're going with this? We'll see what happens. Now, let's talk about Texas for a second because Texas Democrats are still in Illinois as we speak. I'm going to be talking to James Tallarico, one of the representatives, later today about where things stand because the Texas House is effectively frozen. They don't have quorum. They couldn't pass the maps yesterday. They won't be able to pass the gerrymandered maps today. Governor Greg Abbott ordered their arrest, but the arrest only applies to the boundaries of Texas, so it really has no effect on them in Illinois. And California Democrats are now pushing back, saying they're planning on potentially issuing a ballot measure to bypass the Independent Redistricting Commission to target 5 Republican-held seats, targeting Representative David Valadao, Kevin Kiley, Darrell Issa, Doug LaMalfa, and Ken Calvert in an effort to counter what Texas Republicans are doing. So we're going to see what happens there. Sorry, I'm a little stuffed up this morning, but we're going to see what happens there. But right now, Texas Democrats have left the state. Texas House is frozen. California Democrats are going to push back. Meanwhile, in Brazil's Supreme Court ordered former President Jair Bolsonaro to house arrest for allegedly leading a criminal plot to overturn the 2022 election loss, including plans to kill President Lula and a Supreme Court justice after he violated prior court restrictions. This move has drawn massive controversy within the United States. Donald Trump's administration has blasted the Brazilian government. Remember, we instituted 50% tariffs on Brazil in response to what they're doing to Bolsonaro as pure just retaliation because Trump doesn't like what's happening. Why? Because Trump underwent something similar. He tried to overturn the valid 2020 election. Bolsonaro tried to overturn a valid 2022 election. Anyways, I digress. In any event, today Donald Trump announced that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is no longer being considered to replace Jerome Powell as Federal Reserve Chairman. The Trump administration filed paperwork seeking to block veterans from obtaining abortions at the Department of Veterans Affairs hospitals, even in cases of rape, incest, or serious health to the pregnant veteran. Following a federal appellate court ruling that limited Donald Trump's asylum ban, CBS News reported that U.S. border agents were instructed to halt deportations under the ban and instead process migrants under existing immigration law. The United States and Rwanda have agreed for Rwanda to accept up to 250 migrants deported from the United States. In addition, Earth Justice, a major environmental nonprofit, has filed multiple lawsuits against the Trump administration. First, against the detention center in the Everglades dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. Second, to protect farm workers in rural communities. Third, a class action lawsuit to take on the Trump administration to ensure that essentially allegedly unlawfully terminating $3 billion in EPA grant programs designed to fund public health and community resilience initiatives in all 50 states. And then they are going after corporations, essentially corporations that are polluting the air. Swiss president is heading to Washington to negotiate lower U.S. tariffs on Swiss exports. Vladimir Putin is unlikely to accept Donald Trump's ceasefire ultimatum despite the threat of new sanctions. Tennessee is planning to execute Byron Black, a 69-year-old inmate with severe health issues, despite concerns that his implanted defibrillator could shock his heart during the lethal injection. In addition, COVID-19 cases are rising across much of the United States as schools are reopening, but the Trump administration is limiting access to boosters. And finally, Spirit Airlines removed a pilot from duty after he was arrested at a New Orleans airport on Kansas stalking charges involving 2 minors. That's all the news right now. See you this evening. Hey folks, Aaron Parnas here. Thank you so much for watching The Parnas Perspective. Please consider subscribing to support our work as we grow this independent news media entity into something that rivals mainstream every single day. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.